Hey everybody, I'm just going to put on some music while we wait for everybody to walk in.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, and then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time.
Nice. Looks like Lucy's an Otis Redding fan.
I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay, 'cause I've had nothing to live for, and look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Listen, sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. Listen, 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just gonna sit at the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time.
All right, let me bring up the slides. Great. Can you see the slides, Verda?
Yes, we're in business. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, Bonfire 13. I saw somebody already say unlucky 13. Well, we're going to make it a lucky 13 tonight, our last Bonfire, understanding how beliefs shape our democracy. I could not think of a better person to be doing the final Bonfire with than Verda. Welcome, Verda.
Hey, hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
It's perfect symmetry because you started this fellowship journey with us with our first Bonfire, and so couldn't be more apropos to have you here for the last one.
Well, I am, full circle, y'all. And so today on the agenda, we're going to recap the iceberg, and we're going to introduce you all to the last layer of the iceberg, mental models. We're going to do some things where we think about surfacing mental models and what we can do in our own practice to do that. We have some big announcements, a Q&A period of time, and then our hangouts in the breakout room. So let's get to it.
Definitely. Yeah, you want to make sure you stick around, everybody. The Bonfire tonight, the lesson itself is fairly short, but we have lots of announcements to share with you as we're wrapping up the fellowship. So please stick around to the end.
So we're going to start you off real quick, rapid response round. we're going to take a minute to think of what is something that you have changed your mind about since becoming a CU fellow. Put your responses in the Slack channel, and let's take 2 minutes. What are some things that you've changed your mind about?
Life, the first.
I'm still trying to get in, so you're going to have to read a lot.
My future, the ability of young people to make change, the perception of democracy, everything. School does not equal / define success or fulfillment, that this democracy is worth saving. How much I like being social. Oh, thanks, Josh. Josh said that Nick Dallas is cool. So I'm guessing he means he used to think I was, and he's
I
changed
know.
mind.
He clearly
Yeah.
changed minds about something.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
A lot of happy birthdays here for Lucy. So happy birthday, Lucy. Current events, the reliability of our system. Let's see, the importance of outside of school education. Really like that one.
Yeah.
My opinion on podcasts.
I've gotten a lot of great podcasts from this group, indeed.
Wow. Now I know that it's possible to agree with people across the aisle. Fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My interest in democracy. I altered my mind about learning lifestyles. What's considered quote unquote professional, the purpose of an argument, the importance of certain leadership qualities, the importance of balance in all things. My opinion that there aren't a lot of people across ages that can agree and make a change. Yeah, these are all fantastic. I just want to wait one more minute. I see a lot of people typing.
Mid-type.
Yeah, that young people can make a difference. That bipartisanship and dialogue can be successful if we try. Legit, just the importance of deep listening in convo, plus empathy. Man, okay, I guess we could go on all night with these, but these are fantastic. All right, so thank you for doing that exercise. Tonight, we're going to be talking about potentially changing our minds. We don't need to, but we're going to be talking about mental models. And as a recap, as a reminder from last week, we were talking about the iceberg diagram, and specifically the third level of the iceberg, the structure of the system. And we looked at a causal loop diagram to show how different parts of the system interact. And today we're going to be looking at that fourth level, the bottom of the iceberg, mental models. Now, you might be thinking, if you've been paying attention, that, wait, didn't we already cover mental models like 5 lessons ago? And yes, you're right, we did cover mental models before, but we need to go back to them today because they round out the iceberg. And they might be if you're going to remember one thing from the CU Fellowship, which we obviously just saw, you're probably going to remember a lot. This concept of mental models can be really, really helpful going forward. And that's why we're kind of ending with this. So let's just quickly look at the iceberg again so everybody gets a refresh of where we are. We started by examining the tip of the iceberg, what we can see. Those are the events. Those are the things we see on the news, that we read about online, that we just see out in the world. Those are events. Below that, below the surface of the water, are patterns of behavior. These are generally unseen. We have to look back through history to see what the patterns of behavior looked like. A lot of times it's helpful to look at behavior over time graphs, and we looked at lots of behavior over time graphs. Below that level, the third level, is the structure of the system. This is also unseen. When you're seeing a piece of news, you don't generally get the entire system described to you. You don't see what the structure is. That takes more effort and more time. And sometimes it requires a diagram, like a causal loop diagram, which we looked at last week. And then finally, what we're talking about tonight, which is also unseen and deeply, deeply hidden, is our mental models. And a lot of times those don't come up to the surface until it's too late. And so what we're going to try to do tonight, and what you can try to do in your own practice, is try to raise those mental models to the surface more often with your peers, your family, your friends, and maybe that can lead to some changes to these systems. So although the structure of the system analysis we did last week revealed very deep cause and effect relationships that impacted the problems we're trying to solve, it's still not enough. And so like I was just saying, we need to go deeper into mental models.
And so I think the beauty of the iceberg is that you can even see yourself as a system in there, right? And from the tip is what everybody sees, and then all the way down to mental models and like kind of what our beliefs are and the things that we think about, because it's the mental models that create the systemic relationships in the first place, right? It's all of those beliefs that made the system, and anything that you're looking at. Whichever systems we're interested in, whether it's electoral, education, institutional racism. They've all taken shape because of the ideas, the attitudes, and the beliefs of the people in the system. It is the people, and we are the ones who make the system. And it's because our mental models, our theories about the way the world works, they influence our actions, which in turn influence the interactions of the system. And that is a quote from Peter Senge. And if you have not already, I'm sure that Nick has recommended some of those books. You should definitely get into that thinking. And we all shared together, at least, and I know I've watched it as well, but Chimamanda Adichie's TED Talk on the single story was in week 5. And that single story that most people held about the boy that worked with her in her home, for example, influenced how that boy was perceived and treated because of the mental models of people, which impacted how he then later interacted with the larger system. And so just going right back to how the fact that we ourselves are a system, the beliefs and all of those things will impact how we interact with the system and how the system interacts with us.
Great. So let's go back and look at the causal loop diagram that we examined last week about our electoral system. And because we want to go from this, the third level structure of the system, down to the bottom level of mental models. And so if you recall, the way this worked is we just picked a random point on the diagram. We can start here with pressure for election policy or process changes, and we can work our way around the graph. So if there is pressure on elected officials to do something about electoral systems, then that is going to increase the amount of politically motivated election policy that they put out, which will then decrease effective election administrations. So elections won't be run as efficiently, which will then decrease the public trust in elections, which will then decrease the decision to vote, which will then in turn put, again, more pressure on politicians to do something about that, and which will create this cycle, because then they'll create more politically motivated election policy, et cetera. And so to break this cycle, there needs something to be done here, right? And one of the things that we can do as regular people who do not yet wield the power to change laws, none of us, as far as I know, are Congress people or work in government. What we can do is talk about the lowest level mental models below that. And so to truly figure out why our electoral system operates this way, we need to examine the mental models underlying it. Now, here are some questions that we might ask to surface mental models about elections. The first question is, why do people disagree on what an open and fair election entails? We've talked a bunch about this at Nick's New Knowledge sessions, but there is a big debate on what open and fair means. To some people, election security is what an open and fair election means, right? There needs to be rules in place to ensure that the election is safe and secure. Now, to others, election openness is of paramount importance. And if you ask these questions to someone, if you ask, why is election security of paramount importance to you? Or if you ask, why is election openness of paramount importance to you? That would help raise their mental model to the surface. And we're going to try this exercise ourselves. But I hope that makes sense. You would ask these questions to raise those mental models to the surface. You would not, for instance, go into a conversation and immediately try to change someone's mind about it. It would be much, much better to ask questions to raise those mental models to the surface.
So we have a two-parter for this rapid response round, and you can answer one or both parts, but we want now take a minute and what other mental models do you think people hold about elections? So Nick raised a few in the questions that were brought up before. And or what are some questions you could ask to surface those mental models? So you can do one or you can do both. But the first is, what are mental models do you think that people hold about elections? And what are some questions you can ask to surface those mental models? Let's see. 2 minutes. Let's Slack it out. And I'm in Slack, so yay.
Yeah. Okay, my party is the good party and your party is the bad party.
Yep.
That's definitely a mental model that people hold about elections.
It won't change anything and the system is rigged, right? So just believing that off the bat.
Ooh, that
Ella
doesn't
has a
nearly
question.
ring.
Yep. Is voting important to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question to start with. Oh, here's another mental model that lots of people have, that your vote won't make a difference no matter where you cast it.
Single issue voting, would that be a mental model? It could be. And it could potentially unearth some mental models why some people are single issue voters.
Definitely.
It's just one vote. Do some people being in office affect the rights that you have or that you want or need? Yeah. Yep. Young people can't vote, so they can't impact elections. Got that one from Ash. Voting will never change, will always be corrupt in some ways. A vote cannot serve great importance.
Here's some
I don't
good
know if I
questions.
didn't turn the timer on. We have some questions that we can chat it up about, but I did not start the timer. So
No, I didn't either.
I'm too wrapped up in the questions and
Yeah,
the comments and the mental models.
that's my fault. Yeah, but I like this question. What issue do you care about most? How do you want your community to change? I think I want to borrow that question from Anna. Do you mind if we do a little like role playing exercise, Verda, where
Sure, let's start it out.
we ask questions? Okay.
Uh-oh, look at Nick's putting me on the spot.
I know. So, so you can do this as you can answer this honestly, or you could answer this, or you can answer it hypothetically if you want to.
Okay.
If you want to act, you can put your a different cap on and be someone else here.
All right, let's see.
All right. So first question is, let's assume though that you are a citizen in the U.S. You could be anywhere. All right.
Okay.
Which issue do you care about most in your community? Oh no, I think you've either I'm not online or I think you froze. Right when you're about to answer too. Oh no, we lost. So yeah, you guys can confirm that we lost Verda. Oh man, I'm still here. Wow, that was. Hey Verda, you're back. I can't hear you, but you're back.
What'd you hear?
So you were literally about to, yeah, you probably just dropped the most knowledge that's ever been said in a bonfire.
I doubt it.
And I missed it. I asked, what issue do you care about most in your community? And then you froze like right when you're about to say it.
So I started with housing insecurity, and that there are many people that do not have a place to live, and especially children that don't within my community, and that we are too wealthy for that to be the case. So that's really important to me. That's one issue that's important to me, and that feels very connected here in my neighborhood to your race and to your socioeconomic status. So all of that feels extremely important to me.
Now, do you think that that there could be a positive impact on housing insecurity through voting? Do you think voting can play any role in helping that situation?
Yes and no. So I think that it can if candidates were talking about it, but I don't feel right now that the candidates currently are talking about it enough. And I think that they're not talking to the people that are the most impacted by insecure housing. So I think if those two things could happen, then maybe the voting around that could make a difference, but those things have to happen first, I think, in order for it to get to a place where we can vote on it.
Now, why do you think elected officials, including, say, candidates for mayor,
Mhm.
are not focusing on this issue compared to other issues?
I think that sadly, I just think many of them don't have the imagination enough to think of a solution. So I think it's always like, going around in circles around what's the solution to this, and we're not thinking broader or even bigger than that. And I don't think that enough politicians actually speak to people that are without homes. I really don't. I don't think that there's a willingness to have a conversation, right? And all of that. So I think there's fear. I feel like there's a lack of imagination on what's possible. And I think that there's a lack of desire to actually speak to the people that are most impacted by this issue.
And do you think the people most impacted by this issue, um, do you think they have a fair and equal shot at voting, in the same way that others do or might for their leaders?
No. So I think that for like a whole host of reasons, but I think no. I do think that if they and I think many of them likely have the ability to vote. It's not about whether they have it or even if they're, potentially, I mean, I think registering to vote without a home is a challenge, right? Because you don't have an address that you can say that this is where I live. So this is this is the district within which, or the county within which I should be casting my vote. So yeah, I think I answered your question. I think my answer was no.
Yeah, no, you did, you did.
Okay.
And to me, this is like again a classic example of a causal loop
Mhm.
where a person doesn't have an address in order to vote. Therefore, their voice isn't heard. They can't elect who would be able to help them, and
Mhm.
therefore the elected official then doesn't consider them a constituent, doesn't consider their vote necessary, and then so doesn't enact policies that are going
Right.
to help them. And it's just
Yeah. And it also, I think the other mental model, which is just a structural one, is that you must possess property, or you must be in, like, say that you have an address. So that's like you're renting property, let's say, or owning property in order to have the ability to vote. Right. And so that's also like deeply rooted within the system of like how that, and then there's a whole set of other um, ways that this then impacts my community, and communities that are very impacted by incarceration rates, right? Because then you have people that are now in a whole other county being counted as people in that county, but actually not able to exercise their vote. So it's like all of these many loops that it takes, but the mental model there is around, well, what would we shift in the way that we think if we thought differently about people without homes actually being able to cast a vote because they still live in this country and are impacted by the things that happen in it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for taking part in that exercise. I think that was really helpful to show how like a question and answer can surface mental models. And I hope some of you all try that sometime as well.
Yeah, I have no idea if I helped you all at all, but that was fun.
It was.
Oh, it's me. Sorry. So part of the questions and just what we went through, Nick and I, is that we're surfacing beliefs, right? So it's also just a way to enter into conversations with others. So some of the things that you even talked about changing, right? Being able to talk to people that might believe differently than you. And sometimes by asking these questions, you start to see that you might actually think the same thing, but you might have a different strategy for it. But bringing the answers to these questions to the surface isn't always easy. It's really hard and it takes time, but it is essential if any meaningful change is going to happen in a system, because it is the people that enact the system, and people have to change in order for systems to change. And the other thing that's really important is that we are not doomed to just repeat the same patterns of behavior over and over. We can alter patterns of behavior for better, but
that's only possible if we bring our mental models to the surface, which we tried to do tonight. From there, if we bring our mental models to the surface, we can work our way up that iceberg. From there, we can alter the structures in our system that are causing these same patterns to occur, which will then result in the event and issue that we started with at the tip of the iceberg being changed. And so it all starts at that deep-rooted level of mental models being brought to the surface. As a reminder, here is the iceberg for the last time. Please use it after the fellowship.
so this weekly quest, your final quest is your user manual, something that I loved doing for myself, as well as love doing with other people. And you're going to have an opportunity to create your user manual, something that you could share with people that's about you, where you describe how you operate. What is it that makes you tick? What are the things that make you not tick or explode? It can include how you best learn, what time of day you are most productive, how others can best communicate with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. And the one part that I really appreciate, and I think that you should take advantage of, is once you've done this, is sharing it with other people in your life to kind of see if they agree or disagree, or if there's something that they might add that you hadn't thought about. So I'm a big fan of user manuals.
Yeah, it's a great exercise. We did it all as a CU team. Highly recommend it. Okay, we have lots of announcements to get through. First, I saw some of you in the chat wondering if like tonight was it, if you're done, you're not going to be able to communicate again. No, we're actually having a big commencement event for you on Saturday, June 12th. The details are still being finalized, but you're going to get an email with a special invitation to it. So, this is by no means the last time everybody is going to be together. The Saturday Hangout still TBD. That's why there's no details there yet. And a reminder that even though this is our last bonfire and your Juntos are ending this week, is that we're still going to have periodic summer programming and then more programming into the fall. Those will be announced in Slack. So don't worry, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to gather over the summer. I'm going to be doing another Nick's New Knowledge next Wednesday. So just as an example, there will be plenty more sessions. There are treks that are going on master classes. Gary's going to be running sessions. Hopefully we can convince Verda to run a couple sessions as well. So lots and lots of programming to come your way, even though the core fellowship is ending for you this week. Okay, so there are 2 final tasks for you to complete the fellowship. These are not hard. They should only take 10 or 15 minutes, but they're vitally important to you finishing the fellowship and becoming a builder, aka a fellowship alumni. So the first is to complete the post-fellowship survey. This is meant to measure your growth throughout the fellowship, and it helps us improve the fellowship for the next cycle. The link is in here, but I'm also going to send out the link tonight in my recap email. Also, you need to complete your Civics 2030 pledge. I was going to go through it with you now, but I'm actually going to hold off on that because we do still have some other important stuff to get through, and I don't want you to start it just yet. And so, but this Civics 2030 pledge, again, should only take maybe 10 minutes or so. This is your pledge to commit to helping strengthen democracy over the next 10 years, actually 9 years now. And it's a vital piece to finishing our fellowship. Okay, last thing is our steering committee elections. I'm going to bring up Jonah, who's actually on the steering committee and who is running the steering committee election, to talk about this now. So just bear with me while I bring him up in the webinar. All right, let's find you, Jonah. There he is. Hey, Jonah.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. Let me just bring up the slides again for you. Okay. You can go ahead.
Hey, so as Nick mentioned, I'm Jonah. I've met a few of you guys in the Slack channel, not as many as I hopefully will once you guys are all in the Civics 2030 Slack. But yeah, I'm on the steering committee right now. I'm going to be running the election because I'm not myself running for re-election to the steering committee. And what's going to happen is after this, we're going to be sending out a paper form where you guys can submit all your filing information. And that hopefully should be pretty easy for you guys. It's mostly just going to be name, email, that sort of stuff so we can get a hold of you. Then what you're going to do in that same paper form, you're going to write a pitch for the voters, so the builders and the fellows, why you want to be the steering committee member, why they should vote for you. And that, again, that should be something that's not super difficult for you, but something that hopefully you're giving a little bit of thought to. Once certified to run, eligible candidates, you can see this on the slide, you're going to be entered into another Slack channel. And that Slack channel is going to be shared between the fellowship and the Civics 2030 community so that both sides of that get to see it and get to understand what's going on. And you're going to be doing some special daily reflections. They're not going to be every day. They're going to be every couple of days just to give people time to process what's going on in there, read it, reflect on it, that sort of thing. If you're a candidate, give thought to these. These answers matter. This is what people are going to be using to decide whether or not they want to vote for you. And if you are just a voter, then think about these. Think about what you would say to these. Don't necessarily post them because we don't want to confuse people, but definitely think about what your response would be, what you want to see from your candidates, what you would want to see from your steering committee members, and think about what the significance of each answer means. When we design these reflection questions, we design them in such a way that we hope they will really give people an insight into how the steering committee will govern. And then, of course, as it's specified, the election is going to be using ranked choice voting. And you can see, again, all of the dates are on that slide. I want to talk a little bit, if it's okay, about kind of what steering committee is and just how we operate.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So we'll be sending out a white paper with all of this information for you guys and a one-pager as well. But in short, the steering committee is the governing body of Civics 2030. A lot of times, especially like in high school at our age, people see, oh, you have to run for something and just automatically assume that, yep, that's what I should do. That's not what we want to tell you. Like, definitely a ton of you guys would make great steering committee members. A ton of you guys would make great great leaders in the Civics 2030 community in other ways. So we want to give thought to what your involvement should look like. But the steering committee is responsible for amendments to the declaration, which in general have changed how we are governing ourselves and how we're operating as a community. It's also responsible for looking at projects and improving projects to be funded by the finance committee, which we're in the process of setting up. And so a number of you guys have applied for Civics 2030 funding and Civics 2030 projects, which I've just been reviewing now. In fact, there have been a lot of good ones. And those are all going through the steering committee and getting reviewed by the steering committee. So what you want to be thinking about when you're thinking about whether to run for steering is you want to be thinking about, are you going to be really interested in doing all the governance things, in vetting partnerships? It's a lot of clerical work. And are you going to be interested in thinking about project funding and whether or not to fund projects? The hardest part, in my opinion, of being on the steering committee is having to say no to things that people want to do. And you have to be prepared for that. Oftentimes, though, I find that the best part of steering committee is saying, here's how we can help. And those two, what people are asking for and what we really can and should do are not always the same thing. So being able to look for that is another really incredibly valuable skill. So I'm going to be here to answer questions. I'm also going to be here in the Hangout after the bonfire to answer any other questions. A couple of you guys have reached out in Slack. If you would rather ask that now, if you just thought of something, or if Slack just isn't great for you, then feel free to go ahead.
Great. Okay. So yeah, just hang around for a little bit. We'll answer a couple of steering committee questions if they have them, but the majority of the questions we'll save for the post bonfire hangout, if that's cool.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
All right, let's take a look at Q&A. When are the quests due? So there's no official due date on the quests. That's totally up to you. It'd be great if you finish them by the end of this week to have your complete leadership blueprint. But if you want to take more time to fill out your quests and fill out your leadership blueprint, then you totally can. The only things that we'll have a harder deadline on are the post-fellowship survey and the pledge. We'll give you about 2 weeks to complete that, and I'll give you reminders over the next couple weeks. All right, so we got lots of questions here. This one from Brendan, kind of a minute point, but how long would you expect the commencement to run? I'm super excited for it, but require commitment that day. It'll be about an hour, I'd say, and it's going to be Saturday. The details are, again, going to come out soon, but it'll be about an hour. It won't take up the whole day. Oh, Jonah, you want to answer this one, Jonah? How else can we get involved with senior leadership besides the steering committee?
Yeah, sorry, I just sent it in the chat, but I'll go ahead and give it. Yeah, so there are a ton of different sort of builder rules and a ton of things that both need to get done in order for us to continue operating the things we're in the process of operating, but also new stuff that we're trying to branch into. So Madison Adams, who I think many of you guys know, is a great example of someone who's really carved out this role for herself. She started by running the summer camp, which some of you might know, but I think was before your time for the most part. And now she is, of course, a guide, which is how you guys probably know her. And anyone who's been involved in the Trek, that's also something that Madison runs. And all of that has been stuff where steering committee has been around, has been there to help out and there to just make sure everything is still within the processes that Civics Unplugged to set up. But in terms of just like making something up and doing it, that's been mostly Madison. It's also a great example of the divide between steering committee's responsibilities and just stuff that builders can take on.
Great. Okay. So I see a ton of, I'm going to hold off on the steering committee questions. So that way you can answer all those at the post hangout, but I'll answer the non-steering committee questions. So like this one about commencement, what that is, that's just a celebratory event for you as fellows. There's going to be games, there might be some prizes, there are some speeches, just be a fun event for you to celebrate finishing the fellowship. What the future for CU Fellows holds in terms of opportunities. Some of you could serve as guides potentially for next year. Some of you, like Jonah was saying, could be on the steering committee. Some of you can just help spread the word about CU. We're talking about having prizes for people who can nominate their friends to join the fellowship. So all that's coming down the pike, but there will be plenty of opportunities. Do we start the Civics 2030 pledge after our blueprints are complete? You don't have to. You can do the pledge at any time. Once I send it out tonight, you could do the pledge before you finish your quests. Are there any other CU committees? All right, these are more steering committee questions. How do I become a guide for next year? We'll be sending out info for that about how to apply to be a guide as we get closer to the fall fellowship. So you can look out for that in like late summer, I'd say August. We'll have the application and you'll be able to apply for that as a builder. And yes, you'll always be part of the community. You will not be kicked out of the CU community if you're not a guide or a steering committee member. Correct. Is commencement going to be a webinar style or meeting style event? That I'm not sure about yet. It's up to honestly Mariam and Nor who are planning commencement. They'll decide. But Mary, if you have strong feelings either way about it. If you want to reach out to Mariam from CU or Nor from CU, they're both guides and fellowship alumni. I'm sure they'd love to hear your feedback on which one you think would be best. Quests, there's no due date for the quest, but if you want to put one on it, you could say by the end of this week if you want to finish your quests, but it's not mandatory. All right. Yep, Slack will still be open. We'll just be moving to a different workspace, but we won't be closing Slack. You'll still be able to communicate with us on Slack. Now that the curriculum is completed, would you mind talking about how the CU team formulated the curriculum? Interested to hear how each lesson was created. Joint effort there. It is kind of a combination of a bunch of our favorite topics, I guess, and topics that we thought aren't really covered in school, and so you'd be interested in. So we didn't want to just cover exactly what you already learned in school. A lot of the personal development stuff, I can say, is Gary's brain. The systems thinking stuff, I relied on reading lots of books on it, relying on people like Nick Varney, who are experts in it, and I just tried to put my own spin on it where I could. And then the democracy stuff was just kind of a combination of lots of things I've learned along the way. But it wouldn't be possible without the help of people like Verda, who review the slides and keep me on my toes and make sure that this stuff is good to go.
Nick, there's one question that I answered in the chat, but if you don't mind me taking a few seconds to just kind of reiterate that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. So the question was about committees, and yes, the steering committee is kind of the principal committee, if you will, and then it creates other committees as needed. So one example is the finance committee, which is exactly that. It handles these finances, does some fundraising, does some spending, that kind of thing. There's also, we're in the works creating a social media committee, which again, does exactly that. It handles the social media presence on Civics Unplugged and operates all the social media accounts. A lot of this is basically just taking things that people are doing and putting a structure in place so that all of those different groups of people can have the support they need and have channels to ask for different funding and other resources as needed, rather than just being a bunch of random builders that nobody can keep track of. There's room for that, but
Thank you.
Sometimes you need a little.
And then last question, I heard that Cory Booker was a speaker last year. Will there be speakers like him at this year's? Please message Josh from CU on Slack about that. You can bother him all day about getting Cory Booker and other speakers like that. One more question. Was there anything that any of you learned from this session of the fellowship? I feel like teaching can be just as enlightening experience as learning sometimes. Yes, so true. Verda, do you have anything that you've learned from this fellowship? I know that's kind of a hard question to put you on the spot for.
Well, no, I think it's a lot. First, I'm always learning while I've learned new podcasts, new books. I really appreciate when we get checked on things like just how to show up for all people, right? And how sometimes, I've been around the block for a long time, and I just learned new jokes, memes, ways to actually put an emoji in my Slack, as well as how to remember to be extremely inclusive. So I think that's something that I'm always learning from your generation. And I think the other thing that it just makes me think deeper about particularly each fellowship, but this one I would say mostly about how I am either supporting or hindering the system. And I just think a lot of times the way that you all interact helps me to think more clearly about that and or ask questions. So those are some of the things that I would say, in the moment.
Yeah, I've learned a ton. I mean, honestly, the saying that you don't really truly understand something or comprehend something until you've taught it, I think is true. It's a really good exercise to try to put things in a way that someone else is going to be able to understand them, and then to get the feedback if they're not understanding it, and then to get even more feedback where they take things in different ways that you don't even anticipate. And the questions that you all posed and the answers that you all posed to the questions that we've given you are constantly making me reevaluate my positions on things, or making me reevaluate what we should be doing in this fellowship. The curriculum is constantly evolving, and you've all made it stronger for the next cycle by being as active participants as you have been. So it's a constant evolution, and you all are the reason why this program is going to be great in the fall. All right, I think that's it. And with that, we're going to sign off for the last time for a bonfire. But don't fret, we will be back for more sessions this summer, and we'll see you all in the Slack. Thank you so much, Verda, and thank you, Jonah, for joining us.
Thank you, Nick.
Bye, everybody.